Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I know with what's going on out in the marketplace today, we all have a whole lot on our plates that maybe we didn't have a number of weeks ago, but we think what we're going to deliver to you all today is maybe even more important than it was just a few short weeks ago. Just a quick reminder to everybody, ARG supports over 4,000 companies, and every single day we're having conversations with your peers, and we're learning, we're hearing, and we're listening. And I want all of you to know that the nearly 100 plus coworkers at ARG are here to be of service to you. So if there's anything that you need, even if it's something small or it's something where you're looking to just bounce an idea off of some of our staff, please take us up on that. We're going to continue to lean in and reach out to you proactively and try to share, anything that we're hearing from the marketplace. And I'll give just one example because it doesn't necessarily have to be technical. One of our consultants was meeting with one of her clients, a global law firm, and the director of IT operations, and she shared a 30-minute conversation. And she was just checking in to see how they were surviving and reacting to some of the challenges that they may be having taking a global law firm and going 100% remote. And the director of IT actually said that his group that first week decided that they were going to take 11 to 1 every day and just block it off. We all know that many of us have kids that are out of school and we're trying to teach and work at the same time. We've got probably more time where we're strapped to a single place like our home offices. I think yesterday I stood up for about 45 minutes. That's just kind of how it ends up being. And they took the opportunity to say, don't feel bad, don't have any guilt. From 11 to 1, just take the time. It was so well thought of that the entire law firm globally blocked 11 to 1 to provide people that time to disconnect, make sure that they're taking care of their families, have lunch with their kids or loved ones. And actually, we thought it was such a good idea. At ARG, we implemented something similarly last week, and we've been taking advantage of that as coworkers. So again, even if it's something that's non-technical, non-business, necessarily business related, we're hearing and seeing a lot of really cool ideas that companies are implementing to make sure that we're all as productive and as healthy as possible. And we'd like to share those with you, and we will continue to do so. We think for this webinar today, it's of critical importance, maybe even more so than a few weeks ago, that we focus on the original intent of this presentation, that we really focus on unified communications and what we're seeing in the marketplace and how to really thoughtfully think through that business decision to enable a better collaboration strategy for your businesses. But with that being said, we're seeing a lot and hearing a lot in the marketplace. So what we've asked is actually some of our core product people to join the conversation today. Although we're going to focus sort of the meat of the presentation, we are going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. And a lot of the conversations that we're fielding from our clients directly is work from home best practices, securing now a remote workforce, bandwidth requirements and constraints, mobile data usage management, backup and business continuity strategies. We had a client call us literally just the other day, and all of their tape backups are on site, and their receptionist ended up with coronavirus. And having their backups on site and not stored off-site in the cloud, if something were to happen, they wouldn't have actually been able to get to those backups. So making sure that we're sharing those because these leads are fielding many of those conversations. I thought it was really critical. You'll see their faces on the panelist video throughout the presentation. So although the intent of this presentation is unified communications and collaboration, we've got people with deep domain expertise kind of across the board, and we're going to open up questions for any of the thoughts or challenges that you might be having there. All right, so let's jump right in. So first and foremost, one of the things that we're seeing out in the marketplace, especially over the last 3 weeks, is the unified communications projects that were on the table haven't stopped. So in fact, they've become more critically important than they even were 3 weeks ago. And we're actually seeing those projects get pulled in if they were Q2, Q3, or Q4 roadmap projects. We're not here to necessarily challenge decisions that were made in the past, but when I look at the state of disruption, when we look at the state of disruption as it relates to the communications marketplace, those that followed that blue trajectory, got to remember everything's reversed, were in a much, much better place, that very quickly they were able to turn a on-site workforce or on-site contact center into a remote workforce and not miss a beat. As it relates to where you all have to go for information, especially in a time when I know within days of all of us going work from home 3 weeks ago, we started getting inundated with information from trusted advisors that wanted to help with lots and lots of offers. And you as clients have lots of places you can go, many of which can be valuable, but some of which we really need to unpack to make sure that we understand the angle, the incentive, and maybe some of the things that aren't included in that perception or opinion. So the first one I'd like to unpack here is the analyst firms. Personally, you'll hear me be a little tongue-in-cheek here. Certainly the analyst firms are a single point of reference, but if we're being totally honest, they write book reports sponsored by marketing people. But even so, 2 years ago, we saw Gartner no longer cover on-premise solutions in their Gartner Magic Quadrant. It was no longer receiving coverage in the most recent Gartner Magic Quadrants. We're seeing some of those OEMs drop off. In the contact center as a service Magic Quadrant that just came out, Cisco actually wasn't even included, nor was BroadSoft. When we think about where Gartner has been directing clients' investments, at least for the last 2-3 years, if you have not developed a cloud-first strategy yet, you're likely falling behind. I think some of us have unfortunately felt some of that pressure over the last several weeks. But again, I want to unpack this a bit, because when you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, there are some firms that frankly are included in here, and you kind of get that head nod, almost like the dog when they did something on the floor. You go, huh? What's going on here? I would actually challenge all of us to maybe snap a line. Anything above that line in this current marketplace and going forward is relevant. Anything below the line is becoming less and less so. I'm actually a little confused on, as a full collaboration solution in a unified communications marketplace, how LogMeIn and Starblue and Windstream and Dialpad and Ale even find a place in here. I would even go as far as removing Google. I intentionally strike a line through the middle of Cisco because I believe that enterprise investment in Cisco is still very relevant, and their acquisition of BroadSoft is actually something that I think Gartner really doesn't do justice to when they look at this Gartner Magic Quadrant. And the reason why I strike out Google is we're seeing in the enterprise, especially out west, firms using Google Hangouts as an internal collaboration or messaging tool. But we're seeing, if that is the case, and it's limited, we're seeing then the need for native integrations with firms like Fuse or Vonage or others to actually provide the voice. To see them in the challenger leader, moving into the leader quadrant, again, you got to peel that back and look at it just a layer deeper. So what is critical when you're taking a look at this stuff? Well, it's important to look at the exclusion criteria. So there's two that I want to call out here. First is you have to develop your own proprietary UCaaS application stack. So what Gartner has done is they've disqualified the value that every global BroadSoft partner provides over the top of that PBX software, which I think does a huge disjustice to Cisco and BroadSoft, and does a huge disjustice to the innovation that these companies provide, not just in the API to business applications, but process and support, what they do on the contact center side, and integration with things like Teams. The other disqualifier is you have to be commercially offered in 2 or more of the following regions. Well, if you're a company like ARG, for example, with 100 coworkers, primarily SaaS first, in the headquartered and operating with US-based organizations with international locations, then you've disqualified a huge segment of innovators in the marketplace that frankly are very, very relevant for the way that we run our business. The other area that we're seeing is the supplier position. And just in the last several weeks, free offers are just aplenty. I was watching The Tonight Show, and I'm starting to feel bad for Jimmy Fallon having to do that out of his house. I thought all of us doing our remote internal meetings was difficult. He's running a nationally televised television show with Winnie jumping all over him. But one of the things that we want to just caution on is, as these offers are free, one, we have seen our supplier community step up in the biggest way that I think was fast and in some ways maybe even unexpected. Talking with firms like Call Tower just the other day, they've added 800 clients to free Teams and free WebEx just over the last 2 weeks. And that gives them the ability to provide free calling, free conferencing for organizations in a time of need. Unbelievable. If we look at firms like Evolve, they're providing free voice connectivity and PSTN on the back of Teams so that you can not just do internal calls, but outbound calls, and doing that over a period of time. We've seen firms like Vonage and Ring Central step up in a huge way and specifically support K-12 healthcare and nonprofit organizations that are, very much on the front lines of trying to support our kids as they're now working remotely, and organizations that are out there trying to help those in need. So super impressive what they've done. But I think what we need to be really thoughtful around is as we allow our end users to start using and adopting some of these tools, they are tuning their ways of life to them. So even though they're free and can be incredibly impactful, a lot of these offers come with some nuance and come with some caveats. And we want to be thoughtful around, yes, we're in an unbelievable time. If we think about some of the questions that we were asking ourselves, like, do we need a desk phone? Wouldn't it be nice if we could go video first, like in our business? Our most highly sought after resources are the people who have deep domain expertise in specific products. I've got to pay a tax every time they go to DC or a major metro because they're in the car for an hour each way. What this time has proven is we can be as effective leveraging a soft phone, using a mobile application, working with video collaboration in a way that maybe 3-4 weeks ago we didn't think was possible or felt like we had to inch into, and in a day we converted our business. So pretty impressive, but we also want to be very careful about the decisions we make now and the precedence and quality of experience we provide to our end users and what that might mean when we all get back to normal here. The last place we're seeing is many of us have relationships with VARs or MSPs. I worked at CDW for 7 years, and I would rather lose with Cisco than win with anyone else. So I'll let that stand as its own because I think I still have some PSTD from that. So let's look at how the market's reacting just a bit to all of this. So first and foremost, in just 1 week, Microsoft added as many users to its Teams collaboration tool as Slack has in total. That's 1 week. They added 12 million new subscribers. We're all hearing Zoom and probably using Zoom. It's an unbelievable tool. I'm sure many of us have hosted happy hours. My wife, Christy, went out last Thursday with the girlfriends in Zoom, and we're on there for 2.5 hours having cocktails and yucking it up, which was amazing that we're able to create those connections. If we look at what Zoom's done just in the last 3 weeks, they added as many users in Q1 as they did in all of 2019. And this information's a week old now. So I'm sure these numbers are only growing. And if we look at WebEx, 11 business days, in the first 11 business days of March, they did 5.5 billion meeting minutes and 3.2 million meetings globally. If we thought that our organizations are at any intrepidation based on the types of ages or skills or resources within our individual businesses, I think what we've proven is it just takes a little bit of motivation for all of us to be able to work remotely, because it's very possible. So with that, what are the most common considered approaches when it comes to collaboration that we're seeing out in the marketplace? Well, first and foremost, let me build this out just a bit because I think it's important to get through that. First and foremost, we're seeing people look at their existing investments and thinking about whether or not they can sweat those investments a little longer, or whether or not they should upgrade to a unified communication solution in the cloud. Like we saw a few slides ago in that inflection point, those that went to the right of this slide, proprietary or leveraging Teams, are in a heck of a lot better place than those that are still leveraging existing on-premise solutions. A couple of things that you want to think about when you're looking at those. Minimal R&D. There is no R&D even at Cisco and Avaya and Polycom going to premise-based solutions. They're very support intensive, as some of you may have found out over the last few weeks, and they don't scale. When we think about the proprietary solutions, some of the strengths are, and I'll get into this in a minute, workstream collaboration. They were built with persistent team chat and video first in mind. They provide SLAs around not just voice quality, but they're financially backed. And I think some of us have gotten to experience that. I know personally, one of the fears that we all had 3 weeks ago was, as we move to work from home, can the network support it? Will the conferencing bridges become overwhelmed? And I think, at least from my personal experience in our company's lens, we haven't seen that. We've seen the networks work. We have had to put some of our coworkers on alternative internet access providers like MiFi devices for those that are kind of out in the boondocks. But overall, we're seeing it stand up. And we're seeing absolutely massive R&D budgets here. They are focused on specifically driving native application integration into the business applications that you all use to run your businesses, which is unbelievable. But it comes with somewhat of a cost. If we look at any change in any business and we discount end user training, if we discount change in support costs, if we discount migration costs, then we're not really looking at a full total cost of ownership. And then, like I talked about a moment ago, many of us have existing investments in Microsoft Teams, and now the question is, can I get the value out of that Microsoft licensing? So huge opportunity. And what we've seen in a lot of organizations that we're meeting with is the answer is yes, they can get more out of that. Now, it doesn't come with an SLA. You've made Microsoft your telephony. If you don't leverage some of the integration partners that are working with them, there's roadmap APIs that limit some functionality. So when you think about Lego blocks, it's almost like if your telephony or collaboration solution was a Lego set and you were missing the wheels of the car that you were building and maybe a couple seats, you wouldn't be able to complete that car, nor would it roll without some of these other integrated components. And we'll dig into that in just a moment. So what's driving the approach? So we talked a little bit about the three lenses, and you'll notice I kept one out, which is Cisco Teams. We, by and large, aren't seeing clients use WebEx or Teams from Cisco as their primary mode of decision-making when it comes to their telephony systems. We are seeing much more regularly Microsoft be at the center of that conversation. Not to say we're not seeing it, just as a percentage of overall projects, and we did 2,000 of them last year, we're seeing Teams just be a heavier weighted consideration. Now, what we are seeing is clients continue to make investments in WebEx and use that as a standardized collaboration tool. We're also seeing them deploy Cisco hardware in the AV and conference rooms, and then asking the question of, how do we make that experience from mobile to desktop to laptop to conference room seamless, integrated, and the same, so I don't end up having to train people on different ways depending on what room they're in? Because the reality is, frankly, that's silly. It's just not what we have to do anymore. So what's driving the approach? Well, what's driving the approach is the way that we all operate in our daily lives. So when we think about how we start a conversation with Mimi and Pap and aunts and uncles and our kids, it's typically video first. It's FaceTime. It's single click. It's mobile based. It's multi-party. Then what's driving it is things like group text and the way that we communicate and use identity versus phone number or location to actually create that. So when you think about, I want to have that iPhone experience at work, but I also want to have that mobile group text experience at work. I've got my fantasy football crew. We all have our neighborhood guys and girls crew. Then we have the neighborhood crew with spouses. And those two tech chains look pretty different, et cetera, et cetera. And even in my fantasy football crew, which is a group of guys from college and over the last 15 years that we get together and really hang as a full, complete unit once a year. But we talk nearly every day. And certainly that talk goes up come August, September time. But the first mode of communication is typically text. So as we pull that through into the workplace, the workplace equivalent of that is persistent conversational workplaces. It's integration between applications like Slack, like Microsoft Teams, like Google Hangouts, for us to be able to seamlessly move between those. And frankly, I want to be able to text, email, collaborate on a document, and then my last mode of communication in most cases is going to be elevating into a voice call or a multi-point voice call. Because if I can't handle what I need to handle in a couple turns, chances are that's when I'll then do a scheduled voice communication. So this is no longer like a nice to have, it's an expectation, and it's a quality of experience that's coming directly from the consumer side. So we have to account for it in our businesses. So now what's driving the investment? Well, what was driving the investment in 1996 was the phone system. We looked at our Mitel phone system, our Cisco phone system, our Avaya phone system, and no one got fired if they, focused on that OEM. Well, that's how people did it 15 years ago. What's happening today is
people are taking a look at what applications do my clients, my internal end users or my external end users use to interface with me, whether it's ServiceNow or Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce. For us personally, our entire business, the way that we support you from end to end, from the time that we're quoting a new solution, building data to support that solution across 4,000 clients, to the time we go to project implement, to the time that we're escalating trouble tickets and working those trouble tickets to resolution, it's all Salesforce. Our entire world starts and ends from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed in Salesforce. Any communications investment we make has to start there. So the new way is the API economy with the enterprise business applications drives the communications decision. And if you're not looking at it that way, I can tell you you're looking at it incorrectly. And we have to look at it through the lens of not just, am I replacing my Mitel or Cisco or Avaya phone system? Because when you look at these new solutions, they're holistic. It includes conferencing, telephony, messaging, collaboration, API integrations into critical business applications, video, AV, it includes everything. So if my ROI to my CFO starts with, well, I can do my Cisco phone system for X, and then this 8x8 or Vonage thing is Y, you're comparing apples and oranges. And your CFO is going to reject anything that comes next if we don't look at it holistically across the entire enterprise. So when we're thinking about how we pull all this together, that's the lens that we're going to look at it through, through the rest of this presentation. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked a little bit about market disruption. We've talked about where sources of information can differ and different points of view. We talked about how the market's reacted and what drives the individual approach. What I would like to do for the next few slides is I'd like everyone to think about this and look at this through the lens of a specific client example. So this is LiveFire. This is a project that we completed in March for an organization. What I'm going to share with you are sanitized under non-disclosure excerpts from the board presentation that they used for validating this project. I'm also going to provide you all some insight into some of the things that weren't available 3 weeks ago, but are available now. Again, we'll do that under non-disclosure, but I want you to see what's possible because I think it's really critical for all of us. But as we're making these business decisions going forward, everything we've talked about so far has been the market and supplier version of what you all need to do to make a decision. None of it's anchored in you yet. So let's talk about some of the questions that you need to answer as you're building a case for this new technology. So first and foremost, why are we making a technology change? And it needs to be strong. It needs to be holistic. It needs to be non-technical. And it needs to speak to those that have a seat at the table with C-level. The next is, were we inclusive? Who is involved in the decision? Here's a perfect example. If I'm moving critical infrastructure and key stakeholders like application owners aren't on the slide, if their thumbnails from our directory aren't on the slide, and you're bringing that to me as the CEO, I'm rejecting everything that comes next. So we need to make sure we're inclusive. We need power users. We need people who have critical dependencies on the technology change to have a voice in that process. Next is, what process did we follow? What are our requirements and measurement for success? Not just did it meet our financial and security objectives, but what larger business value are we trying to achieve? What approaches did we consider? So we'll back up 3-4 slides when we talk about prem, proprietary, or teams. If I'm an executive, the first thing I'm going to ask is well, what are we doing today, and why aren't we just doing a little bit more of that? Can we get by with it? Are we so disrupted that we can't continue to operate at least for the next 2 or 3 months without, and what investment is required? Is it more or less, right? What's the net? Did we look at everyone? How did the market stack up to our specific requirements? Are we getting the best deal? And not just on a unit basis, but what does the cash flow and net savings mean to the overall business? Tell me about the firms that we're recommending. Who are their references? A closing statement that's non-technical and differentiated from why we're making this change. What are we looking for? And what are we trying to achieve? And again, you need to think about that through the lens of someone who's not as interested in the features and functions of the system. In many cases, the individuals sitting at that board table are going to probably assume that you've covered that, right? And then finally, the expectation is we're helping you with that, and who the heck's ARG and why are we using them? All right, so let's let's unpack this just a bit. So this is an actual statement of why we would consider, why this particular organization is considering a move to UC. I want to call out a couple things here for you. First and foremost, they were looking to replace an end-of-life PBX. They wanted it integrated with Microsoft Teams. They wanted to leverage the investment already made in Microsoft. And they wanted collaboration in one interface to streamline communication tools for everyone. They had a disjointed collaboration strategy globally. This is a global organization. It's a little bit about these guys. Headquartered in the U.S., about 80% of workers were in U.S., 20% were in other countries like India and Germany. They had 1,200 total, or I'm sorry, 1,500 total users, 50-person contact center, which was customer facing, and then a small internal help desk. What I'm going to show you is a solution that was built and how they went through that thoughtful process for this client. Now, if your criteria doesn't match this, then the recommendation would be different. So I want you all to filter what comes next through that lens. It's through this client's lens, not necessarily through your unique requirements. Big part of this is modernizing, consolidating, and optimizing. They wanted to really simplify what they were doing. Another thing that they want to do is they believed with the on-premise solution that they had that, by the way, became overwhelmed 2 weeks ago, and they weren't able to actually make outbound phone calls, was that they believed with the support costs, the cost to bring current on-prem, and the outages, is that this would be no net increase to the overall business. And they looked at that TCO holistically. They also had a bit of a unique requirement where they wanted to leverage Teams, but they didn't want to further increase their dependency on Microsoft. So think about that again a couple slides ago, where they wanted Teams, but they didn't want to make Teams or Microsoft their telco, and they didn't want to further increase their financial or their technical dependency, all the eggs in one basket. And we'll kind of unpack that a bit further here in a moment. So think about that. Actually, let me just go back just for a second. Think about what comes next. So they want a Teams approach. So when we do that, the first thing we need to look at are what are the 3 ways to voice enable Teams. By the way, I'm not making a recommendation at this point. These are the ways, right? You can do Microsoft Teams 3 ways. You can do it direct with Microsoft, where Microsoft's the phone system, and you go and bring the other components of that to the table. What does that mean as an end user or an IT support organization? Well, it means you're the help desk. It means your client staff is managing the phone system. So you are the telco. You have to manage your telecommunications relationship, PRIs, T1s, whatever it is, SIP trunking to provide. You need a professional services outfit or a VAR to help with licensing, setting up, and standing up. And there are going to be other elements, things like receptionist, EFAX, 911, that you're going to have to bring to the table to make a solution. By the way, is that wrong? No, it's your own unique situation on how much you want to DIY that solution and increase your dependency there versus leveraging some of these other ways to do it. The next way that you can voice enable Teams is through a direct routing partner. They've got a finite number of PSTN suppliers that are taking that Microsoft stack, adding direct routing infrastructure and PSTN over the top, and then filling those gaps where Microsoft has said, I'm only going to provide these 8 things for a fully functioning unified communication solution. They say, okay, I'll bring the other 2 plus the telecommunications infrastructure. And by the way, I'll manage it so your team doesn't have to do it. The third, and ever evolving, is proprietary with integration. So think Teams with third-party software and a unified communications supplier. Again, if we go back a few slides and we think about that upper right-hand quadrant of Gartner, they had Microsoft, 8x8, RingCentral, Fuse, up in that upper right. What the proprietary UCaaS providers have done is they're leveraging open API into Microsoft Teams to create an integrated experience. Direct routing will be a native experience. Proprietary will be an integrated experience. And there's a little bit of a differentiation there. Again, there's not necessarily a right answer. It kind of depends. But again, let's look at that a bit further. So now that we've gotten into the ways that you can voice enable Teams, there are strengths and weaknesses to each approach. So first and foremost, when we think about the Microsoft Direct routing and proprietary UCaaS, when we look at Microsoft Direct, we've talked about some of this already. One of the biggest things that typically becomes a non-starter here as we're engaging with clients is the SLA. There's no voice or quality guarantees whatsoever. There's limited device options. There's no contact center fax SMS support, and you're not going to get that support. Microsoft does not want to talk to you as a client. So again, we have clients in this bucket that said, I've got the staff, the resource, and the skill set. I've got downstream contractual commitments with my telcos and with my VAR or NSP relationships. I'm going to go, and this makes sense for me, and the ROI makes sense for me. And I'm actually okay with the SLA. The next piece is adding a direct routing partner. We're going to get into some of the cost considerations here too, because that builds into the approach. But typically what you get then is a financially backed SLA. You get mod scoring. You get actual telco support from telco people. You get a fully optimized redundant voice network. You get all the enterprise features like contact center, fax, SMS. Again, gap filling. The weakness is going to be limited integration capability. So when you start thinking about those business enterprise applications, there's going to be some limit. There may be, depending on the partner, some limitation there. Now, from a proprietary UCaaS, you're talking about built from the ground up enterprise voice with workstream collaboration, typically as the foundation for that communication strategy. You're also talking about 5.9 SLAs with with financial backing that typically covers things like maintenance windows. And the financial backing is typically stepping up a little bit further because it's their proprietary system they can control the experience. They're not as reliant as. What might some of the considerations here be, right? Because you're sitting there going, okay, all kind of sounds fine either way. Well, for Microsoft Direct, we kind of talked about that. Between direct routing and UC, think about like, if I've already rolled out Teams and it's readily adopted, and I want to make sure that I'm not taking people outside of that Teams GUI. I don't want a sidecar for a soft phone. I simply want to add calling, and I want them now to be able to make internal and external outbound calls and receive inbound calls just by clicking a native calling button within Microsoft. Well, that's direct routing, right? That's what it is. It's turning on a feature set, and in the background, whether it's Evolve or NTT or Call Tower or Vonage or whomever, your end users have no idea. They think they're completing, and executing a call with Microsoft. On the other side, for proprietary, if you haven't rolled out Teams, and again, this isn't the only consideration, it's a consideration. If you've already rolled out Teams, or you haven't rolled out Teams, then your end users don't have any expectation of experience. You can build that experience real time, and maybe it's not as important. The other thing that you get there is you get the research and development and integration with third-party applications. So outside of Teams, what are the other considerations? As an example, do you want to use Teams for collaboration and messaging, but Zoom for all of your web meetings and conference rooms? Well, the proprietary partners are going to have those relationships in most cases where you can kind of mix and match and put some of those collaboration, messaging, and Teams things together into one kind of integrated solution. So again, not the only considerations, but I wanted to provide just a little insight into kind of how you start to sort through that. And we'll dig into that just a bit more. So when we look at which is best, I covered some of this, but when you look at the market players, again, you can go Teams Direct. When you think about going Teams Direct, we've executed on that with a mix of ARG support on telecommunication services and partners like Planet Technologies that can come in and actually do the training, adoption, and stand up the Teams environment. When you look at the average cost for that, once you load up the Teams Plus, you're looking at about $36 a seat. Direct routing, again, you're talking about complementing with a finite group of partners. Firms like Call Tower and Evolve are market innovators when it comes to their investment in Teams, and you're talking 17 to 24. Reason why it's a little higher is you still have to turn on a certain function, and you're going to incur some Microsoft costs to do it that way. On the proprietary side, they own the apps, so you're going to see a little bit more flexibility potentially on cost, and we're seeing that somewhere between 15 and 25 bucks a seat, just kind of depending on volume, size, scale, and timing. I'm going to go back to this example for a minute as far as what we've seen change here just in the last 3 weeks. So on this project specifically, the case study that we're unpacking here, we had a client with 1,500 seats, but they're all work from home. And 200 of those seats were conference rooms, huddle rooms. They were physical devices in rooms. They weren't licenses for employees. So we backed those out. Then we were able to go to the selected partner and say, these are abnormal times. I don't want your typical business downturn. I want 30%, which got them from 1,300 to 900 individual licenses. So net, this client got business downturn that included 40% of what we know their current user count is, further protecting the business. By the way, 3 weeks ago, that was not a thing ever with these organizations. Many of them are publicly traded. They need to report contracts to the street and to shareholders. That flexibility just didn't exist. In addition, they gave them 6 months of repressed billing, knowing that they were going to deploy a mobile application first, and they couldn't predict at what pace they were going to be able to execute that on, nor the impact to their business. So I want to give you all just some of those insights because I think they're really important. If you were thinking about doing something here, Q2 or summer or next December, as you kind of figured out what was going on and where your businesses might settle, there may be some leverage that this is creating in the marketplace amongst these service providers that can be incredibly advantageous. Again, we got to be smart for our businesses and make a thoughtful business decision, but at the same time, we're seeing some unique offers and willingness to really jump in and help. So how'd the market stack up here? So this is this client's critical business criteria on, I think, this side of your screens. So when we think about this, this is unique to them. They wanted a native or integrated UI. They wanted 5 nines. They wanted supplier diversity. So again, when we think about what's green, yellow, and red here, they wanted to specifically reuse Polycom headsets that they had already made a recent investment in. They wanted eFax capabilities. They wanted to be cost neutral. So now when we presented this to the client, there were logos and actual dollars here. But for the purpose of this, it was pretty clear when we looked at this, that a proprietary solution best fit this particular client's most critical criteria. And again, if you kind of take it from criteria 1, 2, and 3 and kind of build it down, it takes it from this universe that we looked at of 50 some odd different ways to do this and got it down to just one. So last piece here, and then we'll wrap and we'll make sure we have at least 20 minutes for Q&A. So in this particular case, proprietary is the right choice for this client. Their current state had no SLA. It was a drain on IT resource and staff. The system was end of life with no R&D. They didn't have the ability to integrate with teams. They were using disparate tools. The maintenance and support cost is much in their estimation of $10 per month per user, plus management support time, which was another 30 hours per week. So when we look at their desired state, agnostic of service provider recommendation, this is what they wanted. This is their definition of their desired state. And once you start marrying that back, if you start working backwards from how did the market stack up to the approach to their most critical business value that they wanted to achieve, it becomes really obvious for this client where they were best fit. So each one of you, where do you start? So the first thing that I want to encourage is define your why specifically. What are you trying to achieve and why are you trying to achieve it? So if you can't get past that slide, then we really don't need to build the rest. Document your requirements so that you can understand the approach that is best fit for your particular organization. Be inclusive. Do not limit yourself to the things that you specifically might have had historical remit to. You will not pass the CFO sniff test. Challenge the business value. Make sure that when you look at the larger business value, you're thinking about it through the lens of the end user experience and the quality of that experience. They're obviously more so than ever a financial consideration and the technical feature function consideration. But if we document the business value, our organizations can together go back 30 days, 60 days, 90 days from now and check in. And what that also allows us to do is when the town hall comes and Tom's button's not where Tom's button thought it was, we can address those things early on versus allowing them to fester in the organization. So documenting measurements for success is really, really critical, and doing that in the front end. And then a strong financial model, making sure you understand the cash flow over the full 36-month period in which you're implementing, and understanding what's a transition period and what's putting you into a situation where you're cash flow positive. Because in many cases, when we take all of these components holistically, it puts you in a positive financial. It's rare that we're getting involved in a project that doesn't create 10 to 35% cost savings. So with that, I hope that that we're well aligned. I hope that some of those insights were valuable and interesting to you. Who I've asked to come on the line with us is our practice leads. You'll see their pictures here, but as I
jump out of my desktop here and stop sharing my screen, you all will see their beautiful faces in full view. Hi guys, good to see everyone's at least dressed from the top half up. Don't judge. We all know you're wearing sweatpants. I'd like to open it up. We've got some questions that have come in. Again, everything's fair game. If we go around this thing, well, it's not fair to go clockwise because my screen looks different than your screen. But I've asked Steve Grimsley and Jeff Milford from our collaboration contact center practices to join us. I've asked Pat McGugan from our mobility practice to join us. I've asked Steve Murphy, who runs our security practice, to join us. We've asked Kara from our client experience team. Her team is on the front lines every day helping clients. So she's got a very unique perspective on where the challenges might be. And then Jim Begley, who runs our cloud practice on the phone. And certainly you seize the focus, but we know you're challenging times, so we got the whole crew here to help you out. So with that, I will stop talking. And Erica Lord is our director of marketing, and she is on the screen there. And she will moderate the Q&A for us.
All right. Yeah, we got a couple of great questions that I think may have already been answered with text, but good to share with the group. One is, we have a lot of fixed phones across our enterprise, conference rooms, labs, various like office wall phones. Do they cost as much as a fully functional Teams user? And
I'll let Grimsley answer that one. He's in the best position to do that.
Yeah, and I absolutely answer that. There are definitely other seat types that will take care of those types of phones. There's limited seats that just provide dial tone in and outbound calling, internal calling, as well as metered seat at a much slower monthly rate that will have kind of a per minute usage for that, or per minute, and that usually supports those seats, but it takes that monthly overall monthly reoccurring cost way down for those types of phones that don't get a lot of usage or full features that are needed.
all right, we got another pricing question with, do the average cost per user estimates include call usage? So does that sum we threw out there include usage piece?
Yeah, so for Microsoft, there's bundles of minutes for that. So if you go over, there's going to be some usage on top of that. In the case of the direct routing partners and the proprietary, that's mainly full domestic, so local and LD in the domestic US. And there's some costs on top of that. It would be toll-free and international dialing. So that would be the usage that you would get, but from a domestic calling package, that would be included.
All right, they keep coming in. Any thoughts on integrating Teams into a GCC high environment?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple opportunities that we're working with now with GCC High. There's a lot that's still on the roadmap for GCC High from voice enabling that, but I think the APIs have just opened from a conferencing perspective, and we're working through that kind of release from some of our conferencing providers and handling that. But as that roadmap opens up and they open up direct routing for PSTN voice, all that, we'll be right there with you and discussing that.
Okay,
Steve, if I could follow up on that. Could I follow up on that real quick, Erica?
Yes.
So typically what we're seeing in GCC High across the platform and GCC in general is that as people are migrating, as Microsoft is releasing products, they're slowly rolling them into their GCC platform. So it takes time for them to test first in GCC moderate and then expand it down into GCC High. So it will get there, but it's just a matter of time.
Okay. We got another one. We use Polycom group series in many of our conference rooms globally located. We also use Teams extensively. Can these two be fully integrated, and how complicated is it?
Need to get the specific requirements of that phone. If it can be Teams registered, then that can be fully integrated.
All right. Any other questions from the group? Obviously,
there was a couple of questions asking about the pricing that we showed on that page, and just so that we're seeing these questions, but everybody may have the same question, just didn't ask them, is that those prices were specifically monthly recurring prices, those estimates.
That were quoted, yeah, per user. Any other questions? Oh, it looks like we've got one looking for what the lead time would be for implementation on a UC solution.
So that can be anywhere from hours to days, right? Within a week. If you're not porting numbers and it's a turn up of software only, that can be done very quickly as soon as you get that order in and fire that up. Porting numbers is another is kind of the long pole in the tent, right? So depending on the amount of numbers that are porting, that could be a couple week aspect and moving numbers from one carrier to another, or over 100 numbers, it could be kind of a project and be around a 30-day process. But from a UCAS perspective and firing it up, and there's a lot of focus on rapid response right now from all of our providers. So as soon as that's in, software could be up and running with new numbers in a matter of hours. If it's more complex and there's some call center aspect that needs to be discussed, there's some integrations to build. That's going to push that out a little bit more with the complexity of that, but there's a big push to get them up and functional for work-at-home folks right now in rapid response. So,
correct, Steve. This is Kara. We've seen over the course of the last several weeks, multiple providers really pushing and their staff jumping in and getting things done in a matter of days. Porting is definitely the linchpin. If you are porting, if you need to port numbers and you are unable to forward your numbers, then the porting could take, again, as Steve said, many weeks, 2 weeks to 30 days, depending on the quantity of numbers that need to be ported.
We have another one. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to add, from a conferencing and collaboration standpoint, obviously, as everyone has been pushed to home offices, we've never really tried this experiment and had everyone in the world working from home offices, right? So there's been a serious stress test on conferencing providers across the globe. We are seeing a little bit of a delayed response from provisioning new accounts. If you need to provision new moderators or reservation list accounts, we can turn those around pretty quickly, but setting up a new account, typically we can do that within 24 to 48 hours. We are seeing that extend a little bit. As Mike had mentioned, some of these providers are up. One of our providers 2 weeks ago was up 129%. I'm hearing, operator assisted is up in some cases 200 to 400%, depending on which company you're talking to. So lots of people are leaning in heavily on this technology, and it is changing the way we're going to communicate going forward, I think. So.
All right. We have a question on, with more people joining from cell phones, what is the implication there? And that one would probably be a good one for Patrick.
Yeah, the cell phone market has been expanding in preparation for 5G anyway. So we haven't seen much negative impact. Where we would urge everybody to pay attention is in the increased usage. We're in unprecedented times with people working from home and joining bridges and things that we don't typically do from our phones or leveraging our wireless data. That's really where we're going to see an impact. And if you're not doing it already, there's opportunities to take a look at unbilled usage. We have a program, so please reach out to your favorite ART contact and see how we can help potentially de-risk your business from thousands of dollars of overages, depending on what your usage looks like that we've never seen before.
All right. Another question, can we forward numbers while we're waiting for the porting to take place? And I think Kara already kind of spoke to that one a bit, that is a capability if your phone system allows.
Correct, Erica. Depending on the service that you have today, in all likelihood, you can forward your numbers while we're waiting for the port. And there are certain parameters that we can work with you and your vendors to get that done properly.
All right.
And actually, that use case we covered during the webinar, what we did is we created temporary DIDs, and then they were going to call forward their existing DIDs to those temporary numbers, leveraging mobile app. So Grimsley, I don't know if there's anything else you would add to that, but that's actually the exact use case. That's exactly.
All right. We have remote workers have access to Office 365 but aren't able to get to their file server. Is there an easy to implement solution to address this? That one I'm guessing is Jim, Mr. Begley.
Sure. So there are solutions. Unfortunately, moving a file server to a clouded, web accessible solution is not always simple, and takes some forethought and really some planning around doing that. However, in an Office 365, if you're already leveraging that, you do have the access to OneDrive and SharePoint, which are great tools that can be leveraged for doing just that, but they're not always very simple and straightforward. There's two things that I would suggest around them. One is that Microsoft does not back up those things. So if your users begin to put mission critical and proprietary information out there, you would want to make sure that you're getting a backup around that. It can be done very quickly and seamlessly. And then the second one, I'm actually going to lean on Steve Murphy here a little bit, is that as we're expanding out that edge and now we're putting end user devices more and more in the forefront of the control point, we want to make sure that we have a good security, single sign-on MFA kind of approach to that. I'd ask Steve if you would mind just addressing that, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jim. So the traditional approach to allowing remote users to access a file server would be a secure VPN, and that might be a functionality that you have within your firewall, or you can do that independently through a VPN concentrator. Absent that, then Jim's idea or suggestion of looking at MFA, multi-factor authentication, and SSO, which stands for single sign-on, would be another approach to giving your folks secure remote access.
On the security front, someone wrote in that they've seen more phishing attacks, and I know at ARG we've seen more phishing attacks. I've gotten a couple emails from our CEO. How would you recommend protecting against that, Steve?
So immediately, the best defense against phishing, and by the way, I've seen stats that phishing attacks are up like 100% over the last couple of weeks. It's pretty clear that, for example, the director of the World Health Organization is not communicating with your staff directly about soliciting contributions, for example, to fight coronavirus. So what can you do immediately? Educate your staff, talk to them, send out examples. You can find many examples on the internet if you don't have any internally yet. Talk to them about what they need to look for. A little bit more longer term over the next couple of weeks, if you are still being inundated with these phishing attempts, you can use a secure email gateway service, which will scrub known phishing attacks and malicious content out of your email stream before it hits your end user's inbox. So those are the two best strategies: education, and then trying to stop it before it actually is the message is presented to your end users.
So I think that might have been the last one that we have time for. If any other questions come in, I know we've got a couple more that are hanging out there. We will be sure to consolidate those and get them out to all attendees. I did want to just, for just one quick moment, pop back to our presentation here, just to end on a good note. So One of the things that's really important to ARG and something that you'll find right on the front page of our website and something we practice internally is random acts of kindness. I'm sure every single one of us at this point have limited the amount of news we consume on a day-to-day basis, but we believe that now is the time. If you haven't thought about this, to go and do something just completely unexpected. If you're interested in getting some inspiration or just to read a story or two that might take some of the negativity away, you can always hit our website. Our staff and even some of our partners and clients have shared with us, which also gives us inspiration to keep going. So one of the things that we've done is just a simple act. Our CEO gives pretty regularly all of us just $20 and says, go make someone's day. So it doesn't have to be a huge thing that you do. It could just be, dropping off, $20 worth of groceries or boneless, skinless chicken breast to an elderly neighbor that might really change the trajectory of how they're feeling, not just today, but over the course of the next several days. So something we wanted to leave you with. I think it's an unbelievable thing that I'm super proud of that our organization does. I think it's a great way for us to end and think about how we carry on for the next several weeks. So thank you all. Very much appreciate Erica and Lindsay. You all have been unbelievable in taking what was supposed to be an in-person event and flipping them to a virtual event. So we appreciate all of your efforts as well. So thank you all. Be safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.